Hello everyone, FPL Raptor here and welcome back to another video on my YouTube channel. In today's video we have my Game Week 22 deadline decisions where I'll discuss your final questions and dilemmas ahead of the upcoming deadline. If you do enjoy today's video, please do smash that like button, and if you're new around here, make sure to subscribe as well. But without further ado, let's jump into it. So guys, as always, we will start with the press conference updates. Then we'll discuss things such as captaincy and benching headaches a little bit later, because that seems to be the key decisions for a lot of you at the moment. We'll also discuss my team, possible price changes that will happen this evening that might make you want to move tonight. And a lot of people have been asking for that in these videos. And also there is a little section on mental health and how to stay positive in FPL. I'm doing fine myself, even though my rank isn't particularly good. But a lot of you have been asking me, how do you stay positive? Because as much as this is supposed to be a game and we're supposed to enjoy it for the most part, most of you that are watching this and myself will know that it can get you down FPL when it's not going particularly well. So with a psychology background myself and someone that is really interested in trying to understand more about mental health and how FPL can affect that, if you do want to stick around for that little discussion at the end, there will be a discussion around that at the end of the video. And make sure to like and subscribe as well. So here are the press conference updates as of Friday afternoon at 3 p.m. I didn't think we were going to get anything massive. I was looking at my team, and so were a lot of other people, with no flags. That would have been the first time in a while that I went into a game week without any flags, but I now have at least two, and there are a few key updates. So the first was actually Chelsea. So Cole Palmer, Colwill, Lavia, and Enzo Fernandez did not take part in training on Friday, and they are therefore all doubts for Monday. So Cole Palmer's was an ankle knock. I'll read out the quote in a second. Colwill, I don't know what kind of knock, but again, it was an issue from the Bournemouth game. Lavia apparently is muscle fatigue, which is crazy because he's barely played, although that's probably the reason. And then Enzo Fernandez is apparently a muscle issue. It didn't sound like any of them were really severe. He didn't really rule any of them out, but he obviously said all of them are doubts as a result. I just wanted to read out the full quote on Palmer just so that you're aware. So he said, Maresca said on Palmer, he was not in the session today, Friday. We don't know if he will train in the 2 days, Saturday, Sunday. Do remember that Chelsea play on Monday evening against Wolves, so he does have more time to recover than if it was a weekend game. My initial instinct is this might be a similar situation to Isak, where he's a doubt. He's flagged, he plays, and he goes on to Hall. And we will discuss captaincy a little bit later. But I will just note, Maresca thus far, and of course he could change, of course this could be mind games, but thus far Maresca has been really good for updates around injuries. He's not the sort of manager that seems to play too many mind games. So I would take him at his word. I reckon Palmer probably hasn't. But the fact that he hasn't really emphasised how much of an issue it is, all you need is Palmer to train on Saturday morning, and then he's not really an issue. So I definitely wouldn't sell Palmer. I definitely wouldn't bench Palmer. And to be honest, if you were really keen on starting the likes of Enzo and Colwill, maybe you can do so as well. Would this put me off captaincy? Unless, I think if you are like so certain that you want to captain Palmer, like you are 100% sure that he was going to be your captain, you felt really good about it. I think if you were on the fence anyway, then maybe you just move off of him. But again, we'll do a complete captaincy discussion in a second. But for me, because I wasn't on Palmer captain anyway, this has just further cemented that. On Enzo, because I was wondering, should I bench Enzo anyway? And I had a bit of a benching headache. As of right now, all I've done is just moved Enzo to the bench and played a 4 at the back. Another big injury update, and again, it looks like it's a very small thing and he'll probably play, but Ismail Assar is apparently a small question mark, was the quote from Glasner, ahead of Game Week 22 with a hamstring issue. What we usually say around hamstring issues is if it's a hamstring issue, they tend to be a little bit more cautious, but we've also seen players recently play with hamstring issues, so it's one of those, again, without more information, I can't really help too much other than to say, maybe just make sure that you've got a decent bench. And if you were looking to buy a Sar this week, maybe you go for an Ahmad or an Eze if you're still looking at Crystal Palace. And maybe this puts you off buying for now. I would almost definitely still not really bench him unless your other 7 attackers are amazing. And I definitely wouldn't be selling Ismail Assar with their fixtures coming up. Another injury update, and this one I'm kind of a little bit gutted about, is actually Diogo Jota, because if you watch my video from earlier today, I forgot this was a double upload day, I actually mentioned that I quite like the idea of buying Jota for Game Week 23 against Ipswich at home ahead of the double for Liverpool. I'm just not going to go for Jota in a million years now. So Jota has picked up another small niggle. We don't know if it's the same thing, if it's just a really minor, like maybe it's like cramp or fatigue, but he hasn't trained yet. Obviously, Liverpool aren't playing on Monday, so there's less time for him to recover. I'd be very shocked if Jota starts this one. Now, that might mean that he's more likely to start Ipswich, but clearly Jota is struggling. He was finally at a place, I think it was only a couple of days ago, Arne Slot said, Jota is finally in a place where he can play 90 minutes. He still didn't start, came on and scored, looked amazing, but now he's picked up another issue. So it's probably just not for me. And Luis Diaz has apparently got illness, and he didn't train yesterday, which was Thursday, but he should train today, which is Friday. So we might get some training pictures for Luis Diaz. I think it looks pretty likely that it'll probably be Gakpo, Diaz, and Salah as the front three. But if Diaz is a doubt, remember that Darwin Nunez, the forgotten man, has returned after his suspension. All this tells me is that Cody Gakpo is probably the Liverpool attacker to go for. I think he's now started 9 in a row for Liverpool, if I'm correct. Something like 7 or 8 in the Premier League in a row. His minutes have been the most secure, but also the starts. You're almost guaranteed a start this week again with the issues that they've got with Jota and maybe Diaz. I just see no reason why he wouldn't start the majority of games for Liverpool. Now, can I confirm to you that he starts Ipswich, Bournemouth, Everton and Wolves? No. And do remember that in between their 2 double game week games of Bournemouth and Everton in 24, they play against Spurs and Plymouth Argyle. So there is enough doubt for me to still say maybe we just avoid all of the Liverpool attackers together outside of Salah. But this now confirms to me pretty comfortably that if I am to go for a Liverpool attacker, it probably is Cody Gakpo. The only way I'd probably go for Diaz is if, let's say, Jota's injury keeps him out a little bit longer and let's say Darwin picks up something, then it probably looks fairly nailed on that Diaz and Gakpo will get very, very good minutes. Either way, it seems like a bit of a headache. I was hesitant to put this one in there, but so many people reported it that I thought it's worth putting in. I haven't seen any issues with Erling Haaland, but someone said, like, what's the situation with Haaland's fitness? And I'm not sure why. Maybe I've missed something. And Pep said, we will see. Yesterday was a day off. Some players finished with problems. I don't know if you've realised, but Pep has completely just given up hope with everything at the moment. And his press conferences have got worse and worse. He used to say, we will see, and then give a bit more information. Now he really gives nothing. So Pep's press conferences are largely useless, but maybe something to assess if we get any training pictures. On Spurs, Van de Ven and Romero are a couple of weeks away, which is good news for them. That will, of course, strengthen them quite a lot. Apparently, Ben Davis will return to the squad too. But Johnson is a fresh doubt with a calf issue. I think if you've still got Brennan Johnson in your team, I mean, he's just not been as fantastic in recent weeks as he was for that spell where he was scoring almost every game. Would I still hold on to him? I mean, if you've got other issues potentially, but there are some really decent cheap assets at his price, or even for a lot of them a lot cheaper. So if you've got the free transfers, the thing is they've actually got pretty good fixtures. Like Leicester next week is a good fixture. They go on a decent run. I'll leave that one with you, but just to note that Johnson is a fresh doubt. Apparently Cunha has missed training. So we know that Cunha missed with 3 S's as well. What a lovely typo. We know that Cunha obviously had the injury and the suspension. He didn't start the game against Newcastle, came on at half-time, accumulated 0.6 XGI in one half. He looked very, very good, but he's had the flu. The quote was that he could recover in time. I would keep him. If you need to start him, that's absolutely fine. I just think that coming up, he could be a really, really good shout. But maybe this wasn't the best fixture anyway. But from around game week 26 onwards, I am looking at Cunha myself. And then the only other final thing is Donyell Marlin is available for selection, the new Aston Villa signing. I don't think this affects Rodgers at all. It'll be Rodgers on one side, Tielemans, McGinn, someone like that through the centre, Ramsey, and then Marlin on the right. Even if they play like Marlin and Bailey, I would imagine that it will be Rodgers through the middle. So I don't think he's been signed at all to take minutes off Rodgers. I think it's in addition to Rodgers because McGinn is struggling for fitness himself. We know that Bailey hasn't really been at it this season. Ramsey's been struggling for fitness. So I think it's just to give them some more options in the attack. Hopefully that's all clear. So the key ones is just keep an eye on Palmer, Enzo, Ismail Assar, Jota, etc. Let's now discuss a bit of captaincy and also your benching decisions. So for Game Week 22 captaincy, let's do the classic captaincy analysis that we do here on this channel. And I'll be honest, I feel like I pretty much nailed it last week other than Erling Haaland. So my analysis last week was that if I had Haaland, I'd captain him. So I'll hold my hands up. That didn't go particularly well. But after that, I said, I think Isak is absolutely the standout option if you think he gets enough minutes. If you think he gets sort of 75, 80 minutes plus, he's probably the standout captaincy option. He got the minutes, and he was the standout captaincy option. I then said after that objectively, taking away my bias and any fear, Palmer is probably a marginally better captaincy option than Salah, and he ended up outscoring Salah. So I think I got those 3 pretty much bang in order based on our analysis. I just obviously thought that Haaland would do well against what is usually a Brentford side that concedes a lot of chances. Although in that game, City did have over 2xG. It just so happens that it was Phil Foden. And these things can happen, right? We were looking at either Haaland or Fernandes for captaincy, potentially, and it was Foden and Ahmad that scored the goals. FPL is unpredictable. It's one of the things I'll discuss at the end of the video when we're focusing on how can you stay positive. It's so hard to predict football. No one was predicting an Ahmad hat-trick and a Fernandes blank. Well, maybe you were. So this week, we've got the same old candidates of Salah, Palmer, Haaland, Isak. I've removed Fernandes because, let's be real, it's not a fantastic fixture. And also, Man United are a bit inconsistent. And I've actually put Chris Wood as the fifth option. And if you look at the bookies' odds, these are the top 5 in terms of the chances of getting a goal in Gameweek 22. So according to the bookies, these are the 5 that you should be considering. So let's focus on that at first. Bookies' odds suggest that Haaland is just about the most likely to get a goal. And Salah shoots straight back into second. This is how it has been for large spells of the season. Haaland in first, Salah in second. And as soon as Salah gets up into second or third with the bookies and it aligns with me thinking he's a good option, it does make it difficult to go against him. So yeah, 57% of a chance of 1 goal for Salah. After that, Palmer, Isak and Wood are almost identical. So 52% for Palmer and then 51% for Isak and Wood. Just to say, that is a very, very high number for Chris Wood. I'll actually start with Chris Wood as the captaincy option because I have a couple of issues with Chris Wood. I do struggle to captain a player, and I own him. I love him now. He's got me 2 goals in 2. I do struggle to captain a player with data like his. 0.31 non-penalty expected goals is comfortably the worst on the list. His expected assists is comfortably worse on the list. His conversion, of course, it's the best on the list. So if you are more interested in finishing ability, the man is finishing better than anyone else on this list by some distance. His conversion rate has been unbelievable. With Chris Wood, we've spoken about this. His expected goals per shot is really high. So whilst his data is quite low, because he doesn't take tons of shots, when he gets that one shot, it's actually comparably good to some of the other assets. So that's one reason to own him, is he's not taking shots from 35 yards like Palmer might, or maybe even Alexander Isak. He's just scoring very high XG chances, and he takes his goals incredibly well too. And of course, this is the best fixture of the bunch. There are a lot of reasons to genuinely consider him. My big reason is, as you can see, he has a 51% chance of scoring 1 goal. Chris Wood doesn't usually go massive. I think he got a 17-pointer last season, if I remember correctly, got the hat-trick, but it doesn't happen too often. And even in the more easy games, when you watch Nottingham Forest, you very rarely watch them and think, oh, Chris Wood could have had 3 or 4 in that game. You just watch it and think, Chris Wood got that one big chance, he took it exceptionally well, and he came away with a 9-pointer. And even if Chris Wood gets a couple of chances in this game, gets a 13-pointer, I think all 4 of the players above him have a higher ceiling. So for me, I think Chris Wood's got a very low floor this week. I'd be surprised if he doesn't get something against Southampton, but he's just not got that same ceiling that I would want from a captaincy option. So I would have him in 5th. And actually in 4th, I probably would have Alexander Isak. Now, I might regret saying this because the man is in ridiculous form. And if you look at his goal threat, it's equal to Haaland and slightly higher than Salah. And I think Isak's a better finisher. I think Isak, well, at least in his current run of form, Isak is finishing absolutely everything. He's also on penalties as well. And what I like about Isak is he's also pretty creative. We spoke about this in recent weeks. 0.15 expected assist per 90 is actually really high for a forward. Look at Haaland's expected assist. Look at Wood's expected assist. Isak also very rarely shoots off target. His shots are often on target, which means he can pick up assists through rebounded shots. Isak is just the real deal. And we've just seen that Bournemouth conceded so many chances to Chelsea. I know it was 2-2, but they could have conceded a lot more. So I think Isak is still a really good captaincy shout. There's obviously no doubt around his fitness this week, which is nice. I would expect him to get pretty good minutes. There's very little bad to say about him, other than I just think when it is quite close, and I think I marginally do prefer the fixtures of Brentford and Wolves for Salah and Palmer, I tend to lean towards the midfielders. Extra point for a goal, extra point for a clean sheet. And as a result, they tend to just have a higher ceiling. Of course, if Isak goes and gets another 16-pointer, well, then Salah and Palmer probably don't outscore him. But I would need Isak to have... Like, if Isak had Leicester at home this week, I'd probably go for Isak. Or even, let's say, Isak had Brentford at home or something like that, then I'd be more tempted. I do still just rate Bournemouth. I mean, as you can see by the opponent XGC rank, they are the 8th best defence in the league this season, which is better than any of the other defences that these players are facing this week. So I would just about have Haaland in 4th. And honestly, do you know what? I'd have Isak in 4th and I'd have Haaland in 3rd. I would probably order the captaincy options as they are on this list, although that wasn't intentional. Ipswich are really unpredictable. I never know which version of them is going to turn up. They went on that spell where they actually started to defend a little bit better, and I do back them as being slightly more resolute as a team than maybe someone like a Southampton or a Leicester. I mean, they are 18th for expected goals conceded, so let's get it straight. They're not a good defence. If I had to predict this game, I'd say like 2-0 to Man City. I think they'll score goals. I don't think it will be an absolute battering against Ipswich, but it could be. And as you can see, the bookies odds back Haaland is having a very good chance. He's scored a few goals in recent games. I think it's something like 3 goals in 4. So maybe you want to go for him. Is he that much of a better option than Salah? Is he a better option than Salah? I don't really think so this week. I'm not massively convinced that he's a standout. And the reason that I was happy to go for him last week is I thought, you know what, Palmer's got Bournemouth, which isn't the best fixture. There were doubts around Alexander Isak. And then also Salah had Nottingham Forest. It felt like a good week to go for Haaland. This week, I'm feeling it's significantly less. So as a result, I'm going to say I would have Haaland in third, which leaves Palmer and Salah. I do think they are the 2 standout captaincy options. With Palmer, it just comes down to if he starts and gets 90, because he might start but then come off at 60 if he is carrying an issue. He might start and then pick up an injury during the game. He might start on the bench, and then if they really need him, he'll come on. Otherwise, he might just stay on the bench. Is that doubt enough? Maybe. Maybe if we don't see him in training before the deadline, which it sounds like we're not going to, if we don't get an update on Saturday morning, maybe it's just not worth the risk. Because when you look at the underlying data, when you look at the bookies' chances of a goal, when you look at the fixture, I don't think Palmer's that much better. He's got slightly greater creativity, but quite a bit lower goal threat. Wolves are actually a slightly better defence than Brentford, and the bookies even suggest that, you know what, he's got a slightly lower chance of scoring a goal than Salah. So I think when I put all of that together, and just also, Salah has just been so elite this season. He really could have, and maybe should have got a couple of goals against Nottingham Forest, at least one, which was cleared off the line by Ola Aina. I'm just not sure there's enough for me right now to go for Palmer ahead of Salah. So at the moment, my armband is on Salah. It was also on Salah before I even found out about Cole Palmer, but that's further cemented it. I know FPL have Brentford down as a red fixture. I think that's more for the defenders. From an attacking perspective, it's a good fixture. Brentford are 16th this season for expected goals conceded. Salah is very, very creative. He's got great goal threat too. And I know he's just blanked. I think it was like the first time he's blanked since like game week 7 or game week 9 or something crazy like that. But again, he had chances. Go and watch the highlights. There was one where Sells made a brilliant save to tip it over the bar. There was one that Ola Aina cleared off the line. There were 2 times that he got in behind the defence and it was just a slightly heavy touch. And yeah, you might say, as a result, Salah's out of form. I don't buy that. It was just one of those games where Salah was very, very close to returning. So I will sit here right now and say, I would order them. Maybe Isak would be ahead of Haaland. I think I would order it as it is on this list. Salah, Palmer, Haaland, Isak would. I just don't think there's a need to risk it on Palmer. If Palmer had Leicester at home or Southampton at home, maybe you just say, do you know what? Even though he is a doubt, I'll still give him the armband. But I don't see Wolves at home as that brilliant of a fixture. I know Isak's just got a 16 pointer against them, but I don't see it as that great of a fixture that I'd want to back against Salah. Let me know who you're captaining down below. I'll be giving it to the Egyptian King. So when I asked for your questions on Twitter, pretty much all of them were around benching. In fact, I think like 90% of them were around benching decisions. A lot of people this week might be rolling the transfer. There doesn't seem to be as much transfer activity this week. And that's not to say you shouldn't make one, but it felt like a good time to discuss benching decisions. As I always say, I can't predict the future. And that's a very obvious point to make. But I might sit here and say, oh, I think that I would have Ahmad ahead of Iwobi. And then Iwobi, as we saw last week, puts in 2... By the way, if you've still not seen the Fulham goals, please go watch them. Sideways pass from Robinson. Iwobi whips in a really, in all honesty, not even a particularly good cross for either of them. No one touches it, and then the ball just goes into the net. I can't predict an Iwobi brace from 2 random crosses, so please don't hold me too accountable when the benching decisions inevitably backfire, which is why I would trust your gut feeling. I've played FPL for a long time. I've given advice for a long time. I can guarantee to you, benching a haul or captaining the wrong player is significantly easier to take when it was your own decision. When you don't feel like if you've, maybe let's say you're on the deadline stream and you've asked me, Ross, would you bench Gabriel or Munoz? And I say, I'd bench Gabriel and Gabriel gets a 15 pointer, but you had a feeling that Gabriel would do well. That would be so much harder to take than if you benched Gabriel because you genuinely thought that was the right decision. I'll leave it there in terms of I would trust your gut feeling as wherever possible. But hopefully this helps you a little bit, this list, in terms of how I would order the assets. So obviously, wherever possible, you start your consistent, more premium attackers, and especially those on penalties. So the likes of Wood, Jimenez, Fernandes, Mateta, Mbermo, João Pedro, they're on penalties and you know they're going to get good minutes. They are always decent assets to start. But you can also chuck other assets in there. Gordon is right at the top of the list because he is sensational. Jackson is the same. Eze and Sarr, I think, are playing in a decent attack with a really nice fixture as well. So they are quite high up the list. So I think a lot of that kind of makes sense. I think everything from maybe João Pedro downwards is a little bit more difficult because I think the assets start to get a little bit closer there. And at that point, I think you're starting to think, is it worth starting a defender in a 4 at the back ahead of some of the attackers? I am very much in favour always of attackers because defenders, yes, a lot of them have attacking threat. But attacking returns from defenders is still not particularly common. And therefore, you kind of do want the clean sheet as well. And if you want them to get bonus points, unless it's just a random game that doesn't have a lot of attacking returns, you kind of do need them to get the clean sheet as well to get the bonus points. So that as a result, you can see that I am largely favouring a lot of the attackers. The first big discussion was around João Pedro Ahmad. A lot of people had that decision. I have gone João Pedro ahead of Ahmad, despite me thinking that Ahmad right now is a better asset than João Pedro. The reason for it, if I was to predict the way this game goes, I think Brighton will give Manchester United a really tough time. I look at that and think, do you know what? I could see Brighton winning 2-0, 2-1. I don't think this is an amazing game for Manchester United. I know I've got Fernandes higher. Fernandes takes set pieces, but also penalties as well. So that's the only reason he's on there, is that I just always favour penalty takers. That's why he's higher. On João Pedro, his data has been awful recently. He's got 0.8 XGI in 7 games. It's terrible, but he's still on penalties. And the big thing for me, I think Welbeck and João Pedro start this one together. And João Pedro with Welbeck in the team has been a much better asset. So if Welbeck doesn't start, I think this is wrong, and I think I would start Ahmad. But on the basis that Welbeck may well start, I'd have João Pedro ahead of Ahmad slightly. So hopefully that helps. Beyond that, with the defenders, this is extremely close. I think Ola Reina would be top for me, or a Nottingham Forest defender. Clean sheet potential is through the roof. Ola Reina is really good for bonus points. Got some attacking threat too, as per Milenkovic as well. So I would have those Forest defenders right at the top. I've then gone for Trent, and this is a difficult one, right? Because do I expect them to keep a clean sheet against Brentford? Probably not. But there's always a chance, and I just think that Trent's ability on the ball is better than any of the other defenders on this list. So whilst he's not in a great run of form, whilst Liverpool have conceded some goals recently, I would find it very difficult personally to bench Trent. But then you look at some of those cheaper assets, and they are doing very well. Out of sort of Robinson, Hall, Munoz, who are the key bunch of slightly cheaper assets, I think I'd go Robinson this week as the slightly better one to start. Again, it's mainly based on the fixture. Leicester is a fantastic fixture. His 2 assists in Gameweek 21 were really lucky, to be honest, so I'm not expecting that again. But he is very creative. He's decent for baseline bonus. And also, Fulham are a pretty good defence as well. So I think I would just about have Robinson ahead of Hall, and I would have Hall slightly ahead of Munoz. I may well regret saying this, but I've put Gabriel below all of them. I fancy Villa to do okay in this game, and I just don't think that I don't think that Arsenal are a particularly good run, despite the fact that I think they were slightly better against Spurs. I'm just not sure I back them for a clean sheet. And whilst Gabriel from set pieces, as I've said, is a monster, like he's so good in the air, I just think I prefer the other assets this week. And at some point, you do have to take a couple of risks, and benching your Arsenal defender maybe isn't an awful risk to take. I think that from Aina to Gabriel, those defenders are so close that it is worth trusting your gut feeling, but that's the way that I would order them. Then I've obviously got Watkins, Enzo, Rodgers. Enzo's just not been great recently. He's a bit of a doubt himself. Palmer and Lavia are a doubt, so even if he starts and they don't, it looks like it could be a slightly weaker Chelsea side. So I've got Enzo down there, and obviously Watkins and Rodgers, whilst I've just said that I expect Villa to score, I don't expect them to score many, and trying to predict whether they will be the ones to get the returns isn't great. And also Duran could get minutes in this game as well. It's up to you really with these benching decisions. I've done my best to order the assets that will hopefully help you. There will be assets that I've of course not listed that you own, but you can hopefully try and place them based on my logic there. For me, this week, it's been made a little bit easier. I'll be benching Enzo, I'll be benching Rodgers, and I'll be benching Vandenberg. So luckily for me, I don't have a terrible benching headache this week, but if I haven't answered your benching dilemma, let me know in the comments and I'll do my best to reply. I'm going to do my best to make this like a 2 to 3 minute section because I'm aware that I've covered this a lot recently, and some other YouTubers have covered like an entire video on chip strategy in the upcoming schedule, but I'm still getting a lot of key questions around kind of when should we wildcard, can I play the bench boost this week, when are the doubles that we're expecting, etc, etc. So very briefly, We have a double game week for Liverpool in game week 24, which is Bournemouth and Everton for Liverpool and Leicester and Liverpool for Everton. So that is the first double game week, only those two teams. It's the postponement from earlier on this season. The next blank or double that we have is blank game week 29, which is due to the EFL Cup final. So the EFL Cup finals will be played at the same time as 29. So those teams that reach the final and the teams that they play against in 29 will blank. So at the moment, Newcastle look very likely to reach the final because they won against Arsenal 2-0 in the first leg. At the moment, it would be Newcastle and Palace as two of the teams that blank in 29. And then if Spurs reach the final, it will be Spurs versus Fulham that will blank in 29. If Liverpool reach the final, it will be Liverpool versus Villa that blank in 29. So basically, from those teams, and it could also be Arsenal and Chelsea, but it's likely at the moment, I would imagine, to be Newcastle, Palace, and then probably still Liverpool and Villa as the four teams that blank in 29. So there is a blank game week for four teams in 29, and therefore there is a double game week in 33 for probably the four teams that blank in 29. So we're expecting those four teams, to be rearranged for game week 33. So essentially a small blank in 29, which will then become a small double in 33. Blank game week 34 is then a slightly bigger blank game week, probably, which is due to the FA Cup semi-finals. And the reason I say it's probably a slightly bigger blank game week is because it's the semi-finals, not the final. We could, of course, have four Premier League teams that are in the semi-finals, and obviously all of the four teams that they play against would also blank. So we could have, and we probably will, have 8 teams that blank in game week 34 if all of the teams that reach the semi-finals are from the Premier League. Hopefully that makes sense, but as a result, we're probably expecting game week 34 to be a slightly bigger blank game week for the FA Cup semi-finals. And as a result, we are then going to have another double game week in 36, which again will probably be the 8 teams that blank in game week 34. They will have a double game week in 36. So to recap that, very small double in 24 for just 2 teams, a slightly bigger double in 33 for 4 teams, and then probably an even bigger double in 36, which could be for up to 8 teams, and then 2 blanks in 29 and 34. As a result, if you're asking me, should you use your wildcard right now? Is it worth saving trips like the bench boost and assistant manager for future game weeks? Probably. I'm looking at playing almost all of my chips from game week 30 onwards. I'm looking at something like wildcard 30, assistant manager either 31 to 33 or 36 to 38. I'll look at using my bench boost in either double 33 or double 36. And at the moment, I'm probably looking to use my free hit in game week 34. Hopefully that is helpful for you in terms of the upcoming schedule. So yes, if you can, save those transfers. If you can, save those chips. And prepare for a pretty insane schedule from game week 29 and beyond. So this might be a slightly weird section to have in a deadline decisions video, because obviously the purpose of this video is to help you for those upcoming decisions ahead of the deadline. But so many people recently have been asking me, how do I stay positive? I feel like packing it in. I'm not enjoying FPL. How do I stay positive? How do I not let it affect my mental health? Because it is starting to do so. If you're wondering why people are asking me, I've got a long background in psychology. I've got a bachelor's degree, a master's degree. I'm doing a PhD. I lecture in psychology. I've written a book around psychology as well. I've got 4 published studies in the field of mental health too. So it's something that I'm quite well read on. And also I have people close to me, and I myself have suffered from difficult mental health issues in the past. I think most people have, and I'm so glad that we are getting to a point now where more and more people are talking about it. I feel like one of the very few things that I can do good with my 150,000 odd subscribers is discuss mental health quite openly. Now, some people will be watching this and thinking, what a snowflake, you're so soft, how can you have poor mental health in relation to a game? If that is you, simply skip to the next section, and it is wonderful that you don't have to suffer with those issues. But for a lot of us, it's probably an extension of something that we're suffering with in our everyday life that carries over to FPL. And something that we've realized through doing a lot of research is that people use FPL as an escape. So if you use FPL to escape from a lot of the issues that are going on in your everyday life, and the thing that you use to escape is frustrating you and you're not getting much joy from it, inevitably that is going to cause further issues. So what I've done here is I've tried to go through some of my key tips on how to stay positive. I'll try not to dwell on it for too long, but I think all of these are extremely helpful, not only in FPL, but in your everyday life too. So I hope that you can at least take a couple of pieces of advice that you can carry forward. And if anyone does need to talk to someone, because I really want you to know you are absolutely not alone, please just chuck me an email. And I know an email sounds strange, but with DMs, I get so many of them that I might miss it. If you need to talk to someone, just send me an email. I promise you I'll get back to you. You are not alone. But let's discuss. And even if, by the way, you're just like, it just slightly affects you and slightly annoys you, this might still be useful. Tip number 1 is about self-distancing. It's my favorite tip in terms of how to stop letting things really affect your mood and mental health. The idea is when you are experiencing something and it is affecting you emotionally, it's because you're so enveloped by the situation. Let's say you're on a Sunday, you've got a massive red arrow and it's getting bigger and bigger. Like, let's say this Sunday, you were already in a big red arrow. Ahmad scores 1 goal, Ahmad scores 2 goals, Ahmad scores his hat trick. And you're just feeling more and more overwhelmed. You're feeling more and more angry and upset. You are so enveloped by the situation. At that point, it probably feels like the end of the world. It feels awful. If I were able to, you know, like in The Sims when you pick someone up and plop them out, if I was able to just pick you up and remove you from that situation, you would probably look at it and say, well, that's not a big deal at all. Firstly, FPL is not everything. Even to me, who is my job, it's still not everything. One specific game week within a season isn't the end of the world. One player hauling isn't the end of the world. And also, where you finish in FPL, again, probably isn't the end of the world. When you actually rationalize what that specific event means, a captaincy blank or whatever it is, it's really not that big of a deal in comparison to the rest of your life. So what we call that is self-distancing. It's why often, have you ever just given really good advice to a friend and you've just thought, I wish I could take that advice myself? Like if someone were to come to me and say, like right now, I am offering what I hope to be very good advice. I struggle to take this advice sometimes myself. It's because we are so engulfed by the situation that we're in. So what we need to try and do is remove ourselves from the situation, which is called self-distancing. How do you do that? You just have a few statements that you read out to yourself that help you understand the situation that you're in isn't going to be the case in the long term. So one thing you can say to yourself, in 1 year time, will I really care that this player blanked in this specific game week? Or in 1 year time, will I really care that I had a game week 21 captaincy blank? The answer is honestly, I'm a content creator. Again, it's my job. I earn money from FPL. I cannot tell you for the life of me who I captained in any of the game weeks last season, really. I can't tell you massively about any players that hurt my rank. Even about 6 weeks ago, I'd struggle. Now, some of you might have a better memory than me and it might affect you more, but largely the point is it feels worse in the situation than it actually is moving forward. So try wherever possible to just understand the bigger picture. Try to read yourself statements like, in 2 years' time, will I really care this player blanked? Another nice little technique is called the 5x5 rule, which is if it's not going to worry me or bother me in 5 years' time, don't give it more than 5 minutes. I like the sentiment of the 5x5 rule, which is used in therapy a lot. I'm not sure that it applies massively because lots of things won't affect you in 5 years, but they will affect you for more than 5 minutes. But the idea is don't waste your energy on things that don't affect your overall life. So that's tip number 1. Tip number 2 is acknowledge the illusion of control. As human beings, we feel like we have control over everything, right? This is actually a cognitive bias. We feel like we can control events we can't. You cannot control what your 11 players do at the weekend in the Premier League. They are running around a pitch, 11 versus 11, running around a pitch, kicking a football around. How are you supposed to control that? All you can do is put out the best team you possibly can. It's the same thing I always say for exams as well. You know when you finished an exam and you put your pencil or pen down in the exam? That's it. You've got your grade the moment you drop your pen on the table because you're not marking your exam. You can't do anything beyond that point. There's no point worrying about your grade after you finish the exam. It's the same in FPL. As soon as that deadline hits, you have done everything you can in your power. From there and beyond, you have to just accept that it is completely out of your control. If one of your players wants to get sent off, if one of them misses a big chance, that is not within your control at that point. So acknowledge how little control you actually have over FPL beyond the point where you enter your team. As long as you're happy when you enter your team, that is the most important thing. And that links to tip number 3, which is to wherever possible, stop judging the effectiveness of your decision based on the outcome. It's called outcome bias in psychology. But what this means is, if you were genuinely at the start of the game week saying, I really think my captaincy decision's correct, I really like my transfer, and I think I've got my benching order spot on, but all of those things go terribly wrong, yeah, it may well be that you didn't make particularly good decisions, but judging it purely on the outcome is not really very useful because it will probably lead to you making bad decisions in the future. What you should do is reflect on the decision-making process and say, right, was it actually the best captaincy decision? But without the outcome in mind, try and think about the process that led to you making that decision. Like for me, this last week, I captained Salah against Forest. I still back the decision, but upon reflection, maybe I update my thinking and just say, do you know what? Maybe when Salah is playing against more difficult opposition, maybe that is an opportunity to look elsewhere. That's not based just on the outcome, it's based upon the decision-making process. Next is tip number 4. I love this one. And this goes for every aspect of life. You have to realize how important the lows are in FPL and in life. life is a journey. This is going to get really, really sentimental. Life is a journey, but you need this sort of roller coaster element to life. Like if you only have highs, and many of us won't experience this, but if you only had highs for your entire life, everything went perfectly, it starts to lose its importance and its meaning, and it starts to lose that value. Like when you have that really amazing point in FPL, the reason that feels so amazing is because it's often off the back of 2 or 3 red arrows. If every single thing you did in life went perfectly, it's a bit of one of the reasons why often people suggest that people that are super rich and can have everything aren't always that happy. You kind of need a little bit of the struggle along the way. So just realize that actually the red arrows make the green arrows feel even better. That's what I'm saying to myself as well off the back of 4 red arrows. I've realized I've already been going for 8 minutes, by the way, so this will be a long section. The next thing for me, this then moves on to how do you actually deal with it in the moment? Because all of these are more like philosophical things you can think about. But in the moment, I find it really useful to demonstrate competence in another area. I'll go and do a piece of PhD research, or I'll go and do something that makes me feel like I'm good at that thing, like something away from FPL. Or I'll go and try and make someone smile. Like I'll call my girlfriend and FaceTime her, and that'll make me feel a little better. I'll spend time with my loved ones. Try and do something which, yes, distracts you, but not just distracts you. Because research suggests that just distracting you won't help. But by doing something where you're demonstrating competence, even if it's going and doing like gardening, demonstrating that you are good at something else will, yes, take your mind off FPL, but also show you once again that FPL isn't the be-all and end-all. It's not even the most important thing in most of our lives. It shouldn't be the most important thing in any of our lives. So that often helps. And linked to that is like, can you change your environment? I live in a studio. I'm often sat here, you know, sometimes without the window open, watching the football. I feel a bit like, like angry. I'm on my phone. I'm hot. Just changing my environment up helps. Like if you're in a big house, great, go to a different room. But if you're not, just go for a walk, log off social media, go to the gym. Don't sit there and ruminate. Rumination is when you think about the same thing over and over again. You sitting there scrolling through Twitter, watching the that's not going to help you. Keep on checking sofa score. I do it myself. I know exactly how it feels. But I always feel better when I switch my environment up, go for a walk, go to the gym. And in going to the gym, it's another way that you can demonstrate competence as well. Tip number 7 and the final one, and this is the hardest one of all, is, sorry for the shouting outside, by the way, whilst it is tough, try to see the funny side to it. Listen, it is quite funny. Like when you get a big red arrow, one of your player misses a penalty, someone gets sent off, like Solanke's own goal, Bruno's red. It is funny. And you know it's funny because if it happens to someone that you don't own, you laugh, right? So it is objectively quite funny when you have a bit of a disaster game week. So don't do this. Like no one at the time just sits there cracking up that all of their players are blanking. But upon reflection, maybe like I'm looking back on my last week, there are some funny incidents in there. Just try and smile it off. Like I actually find after a red arrow, I hate recording YouTube videos. I'll be honest. I don't want to sit here and record a video after I've just had a red arrow. But after I record the video, I feel so much better. The reason for that is because I sit here with a smile on my face. I laugh it off along with you guys, and that makes me feel better. I'm going to leave it there because that is over 10 minutes, and it was supposed to be like 4 or 5 minutes. I guess the key thing for me is if FPL is truly affecting your mental health to the point where it's making you severely depressed, severely anxious, really angry, you feel like you're not acting in a way that is in accordance with who you are, I would take a break. So I wouldn't do any of this. I would just stop playing the game because it is a game and it is meant to bring us happiness. And that is the key thing here. When you play games and have hobbies, as much as they might be to escape, they're also to bring you joy. And if it's not bringing you joy at any point, pack it in because that is the point of it. But for most of us, it's probably at a point where it does bring you a lot of joy. You love FPL. There are lots of positives. Build relationships on social media. It gives you something to do at the weekend. It increases your knowledge of football. But there are negative elements. And something that you can do to help is hopefully employ these 7 tips here. Let me know if that's been helpful for you. Sorry for taking up 11 minutes talking about this. But I think it's something that we can sort of bring forward in FPL and also our everyday lives as well. So guys, seeing as I'm recording this on Friday, it's about 4 p.m. at the time of me recording this, I thought I would just go through some players that might change in price on Friday evening because it might be that you want to move early ahead of the Saturday deadline. I'm not saying whether you should or shouldn't. I'll let you make that judgment call. But I just wanted to let you know because sometimes people message me on a Saturday deadline stream, I've been priced out of this move last night, and you might want to make the move a little bit early. So in terms of players that at the time of me recording, and I want to timestamp it as 4 p.m. because in a couple of hours, if there are more or less transfers out, they might either be not predicted to rise or there might be further players. But it's Wood, Robinson, and Eze. They are currently the 3 players that are predicted to rise in price. The other player that's been kind of getting quite close back and forth, if I scroll down, is actually Raul Jimenez. So that's another one where if you were looking to bring in Raul, depending upon transfer activity in the coming hours, he could find himself in a position where he might rise. But definitely would Robinson and Eze look quite likely to go up if the current rate of activity does stay as it is. As you can see with Eze, transfer activity has slowed down slightly, so it might be that he just about survives. But I would predict that those three currently go up. And by the way, the site that I'm using right now is Fantasy Football Hub. There'll be a link down below to get 30% off, but you can actually access the price change predictions for free. In terms of price falls, Gabriel Jesus is predicted to go down in price. So if you were looking to offload him, maybe get that done tonight. João Pedro looks like he could also be going down in price. Again, you could get that done tonight if you wanted to. And also Enzo Fernandez is probably the other key player that looks like he could be going down in price. I'll let you check it out. Again, there'll be a link down below to Fantasy Football Hub. If you want to get 30% off, you can also use that link. If you want to get access to, like, they've got player comparison tool, they've got a fixture analyzer, which I find super useful. They've got, obviously, the pick team feature as well, which when it loads, you can go through your team for future game weeks, which actually has price changes built into it as well. I find that super useful. There are AI recommended transfers. I mean, Opta statistics, just basic stuff of just finding out the stats of key players. Loads to check out. Use the link down below. But yeah, keep an eye on those players that might be rising and falling tonight. So guys, there we have it. That is my Game Week 22 deadline decisions video with a little sprinkling of some mental health and how to stay positive in there as well. But hopefully that was helpful for you. And if it was and you enjoyed today's video, please do smash that like button and make sure to subscribe as well. We are very close to 145,000 subscribers, which is the goal over the next couple of months. And then we will push on to 150,000. But I can only do that with your support. So until next time, thank you very much. Bye-bye.